Should I do like a little intro? Hey guys, this is Aaron Novak, and this is my intro to photography course, shutter speed. In the last video, was that good enough? Should I do it again?
No, it was good enough.
Alright.
I mean, I don't love you waving your phone around when you talk.
Notes. In the last video, if you guys remember, we talked about aperture, and that's... In the last video, we talked about aperture, and if you guys remember, the aperture controls how much light comes into the camera, and it also controls the depth of field. Well, in this video, we're going to learn about shutter speed. And just like aperture, shutter speed Am I in focus? Like aperture, shutter speed controls how much light comes into the camera, but in a different way. The aperture controls the size of the hole in the lens, but the shutter speed controls how long light is going through that hole. The hole itself doesn't close, but a curtain behind it closes and opens to let in light and stop the light. Shutter speed is measured in seconds, and the number on your camera represents how long in seconds that the shutter is open and then closed. On my camera, this is how I set it. A number like 1/4000 means it's going to be open for 1/4000th of a second. But what happens when you leave the shutter open and you have a moving subject to capture? Are you tired of blurry pictures because your subject's too fast? Sorry! You need to learn shutter speed! Well, you can get some motion blur. Photos like this may look cool, and depending on the aesthetic you're going for, you may like taking photos like this. But if you're capturing sports, or you just don't want a blurry photo, you have to shoot with a faster shutter speed. But what speed is fast enough? If I want a clear photo without any motion blur, I tend to shoot as fast as I can. On my camera, that's 1/4000, especially when I'm shooting macro photography, as any movement at this level can cause motion blur. But the faster you shoot, the less light that's let into the camera, and this sometimes can get too dark. This is where aperture comes in, and ISO. But since we haven't learned about ISO yet, let's just focus on aperture and shutter speed. So if I want to shoot something fast, I have to have a more open aperture to let in more light. But if I'm shooting at night, I want a longer shutter speed so I can let in more light. Just be aware when you're shooting at night, any motion in the frame is going to be blurry. But like I said before, this can give off really cool effects, like in these photos. Now, if you're wanting clear photos every time, there is a rule that you can use. You take whatever lens size you have, in my case, a 50mm lens, and put it under 1. So 1/50th of a second is going to be the right speed to make my pictures clear. But if you have shaky hands like mine, you can always double that. So 1/100th of a second is going to be just fast enough. By the way, if you guys would like to purchase some of my photos, they're available on my website. All the money I earn from these sales are going to go towards camera gear and making the studio nicer, so I can keep making nice videos for you. So you get something, and I get something. These are all limited edition signed prints and can be found on my website www.aaronnovak.com, where you take the Aaron and the Novak and you squish them together and there's just one N.com. Well, that's it for this video. In the next one, we're going to learn about ISO, and that'll help finish that aperture, Well, that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to learn about ISO, and that's going to complete our exposure triangle. And as always, if you guys have questions, leave them down below and we'll try to answer them. And if you're new and you found this helpful, or if you're old and you've just been watching this without subscribing, subscribe now. Thanks again, guys. I'm out. That's going to be a pain in the butt for editing. There's so many starts and stops.